Hi there, welcome to the Sourdough Simpleton. I'm Mark Levy the Simpleton, here for another episode of Making Things with Sourdough. The past few times we've been dealing with breads, and many of these breads have been quite complicated. The last recipe took 2 days to make. Today we're going to make something which is not a bread, and which takes about 2 hours to make. So a little bit shorter in time, but still not many ingredients, and something a bit different. We're going to make sourdough crackers. I know, why crackers? You can buy them in the store very easily, because these are sourdough and they're really good, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a few minutes. We're going to begin by pointing out that this recipe uses a discard starter. So if you look at your starter, I got this out of the fridge just a few minutes ago, and you look inside and what you see is all that nice hooch floating up on top. So that's exactly what we want for this recipe. This is a starter which has not been fed for about a week, and it's hungry, and it's very sour, and that's what we're headed for. So we'll take the starter and we're going to stir it up. And stir all that hooch into it. So what we have is a nice smooth, although hungry, sourdough starter. In fact, after we take off the cup that we're going to use for this recipe, it's an ideal time to feed the starter. So I'm not going to do it right now, but you'll see that after, well, you won't see because it's not going to happen on camera, but after I take off the starter for today's recipe, we'll go ahead and feed this and put it away for next time. We're also going to be using whole wheat flour. Whichever whole wheat flour you have on hand is fine. About a cup, or 113 grams to be precise. Remember that when you measure flour by the scoop and sweep method, you're going to get too much flour in your cup. When we calculate the recipes, we're calculating by weight, and to get the 113 grams in the cup, it's going to require you to take the flour and just spoon it in, like almost dribbling it into the cup until the cup is full. And nobody's going to do that, so 113 grams of whole wheat flour in our bowl. We also have 4 tablespoons or half a stick of butter. Now this actually isn't butter, this is a vegan butter, so it's not dairy. This is consistent with what I'm trying to do to keep most of these recipes, if I possibly can, to be non-dairy. And then all of a half a teaspoon of non-iodized, you learned by now, salt. So through the magic of editing, I now have my scale in front of me, and we'll put a measuring cup on that and zero it out. And we're going to go for our sourdough starter. Going for roughly a cup. Or as I said before, as I said a few seconds ago, about 224 grams of starter. Perfect. And this gets set aside for later. Now, we're going to mix the starter in with the flour. And we're going to mix the butter, we'll call it butter even though it's not, in with the flour and starter. And this is room temperature. It's actually maybe a little bit more than room temperature. It kind of started to melt, sitting there waiting to get things started, but that's okay. And a little bit of salt in as well. We're going to mix these up. And I'll start by using just the spatula to mix these up. You can see what I'm doing. Yep, you can see. Until we can get a bit of a dough going. You'll notice there was no water added to this. The only liquid that's involved with this dough is the roughly half of a cup of water that's in the cup of starter. And that's it. So we're going to mix this until we get a dough, and then I'll be back with you after that. So this only took about 3 or 4 minutes. You could have watched, but you would have been bored. And what we ended up with, you'll notice I have my favorite little Silpat mat down in front of me, is a nice little dough, which, put that somewhere, a nice little dough which is cohesive, it's not sticky at all, and it feels kind of like clay or silly putty or Play-Doh or something like that. Just a nice firm dough. So we're going to take this dough, we're going to divide it into half. And we're going to make it into a little rectangle. Ultimately, we're going to be rolling this out into a rectangle. So it makes some sense to make it into a rectangle now. To kind of preset the shape, as it were. So there's one. And there's 2. And now comes the exciting part. No, we're not going to let this rise. We're going to put it in the refrigerator to chill. Much like cookies, if you're familiar with baking cookies where you have to chill the dough. We're going to chill this so that it rolls out easier and stays together. So we take a little rectangle of dough, we put it into plastic wrap, you wrap it up like a nice little package, and we're going to put it in the fridge for at least a half hour. If you have something to do, you could put it in the refrigerator for a couple of hours. If you're in a rush, you could put it in the freezer, but don't let it freeze. So anywhere from a half hour to several hours in the refrigerator is fine. That's where these two will be parked now, and we'll be back with you after that period of time to roll this out, and then we proceed to baking. So we'll be right back. Well, about a half an hour has gone by and the dough has been chilling in the refrigerator, so now let's prepare the first piece of dough for baking. So first we're going to do is take it out of its little plastic wrap cocoon. By the way, I think I forgot to tell you where this recipe comes from. As many others I've talked about, this comes from the King Arthur Baking Company's website. They call it Sourdough Crackers. Works for me. I'll put a link, of course, for you to take a look at it. We're going to take a piece of parchment paper, and I had said this once before, but I'm going to say it again in case you missed it or didn't see the first time I said this. If you have trouble with parchment paper lying flat when you get it off of the roll, just give it a quick little crinkle and then lay it down and it'll lie nice and flat for you. Take your parchment paper and very lightly flour it with all-purpose flour, not with whole wheat. And then we're going to put the dough on that, and we're going to flour the top of the dough a little bit, and we're going to flour our rolling pin a little bit. And the object here is to roll this out, to keep it in a rectangular shape until it's about 9 by 13 or so, and about 1/16 of an inch thick. When we get down a little bit, I'm going to show you the little device that I put together to try to keep the thickness straight. And that is these cute little guides, we can call them. Now this is a 1/16 of an inch thick, and let me tell you how I made them. So the question is, how do you keep the rolling pin at a set height for the dough to get the correct thickness for the dough? Now in this case, we wanted 1/16 of an inch. So 1/16 of an inch is 0.0625 inches. So we have to keep the rolling pin at that height. One way to do it would be to have a guide on either side of the rolling pin which will hold it elevated. And they do make those. They also make rings that fit on the end of the rolling pins, but I don't have those. So to do it homemade, you take a piece of cardstock, and cardstock is roughly 0.01 inches in thickness. So 6 of them would be 0.06, or 7 would be 0.07, which is close enough to the 0.0625 that we're after. Use plain old rubber cement to glue them together, and then cut this packet of cards into 4 strips. So you end up getting like this, and then each of those 4 I tape together so that you get 2 long strips, and each of these strips is used to be on either side of the dough, so the rolling pin is then the correct height over the dough. And that is how you get your 1/16 inch thick dough without being a professional baker. So there are other ways to do this as well. There are rings that fill on top of your rolling pin to make the thickness guides, but this was quick and easy and certainly inexpensive. And by doing this, I can know that my dough is coming in at about 1/16 of an inch, which is what I want it to be. Now, this should be a rectangle. It's a bit off. You can use the edge of your rolling pin to try to square that up, or just live with it, which is what I'm probably going to do. And we'll have some irregularly shaped crackers, but hey, they'll still taste good. Okay, so when you get it about where you want it, I know it's not square, but hey, neither am I. We're going to gently put this into a baking sheet. And I'm going to show you what we're going to do with this because we're going to do it twice. I'm not going to make you suffer through it twice. So we take the dough, we're going to brush it with a little bit of olive oil. Now the original recipe called for some herbs and stuff like that. I'm not doing that. This is just going to do with salt, but maybe next time we could do that. We're going to add some sea salt to this. And then we cut them into cracker shapes using a pizza wheel, which is by far the easiest way to do this. And we're going to try and get them roughly 1.5 1.25 crackers. And then from here, these go into a 350-degree oven. Which I will tell you more about in just a second. While we're doing the second one now, cutting it, having rolled it out and put our oil on it. And I after I showed you how to do this the second before with the first one, I realized that I had forgotten to tell you about docking the dough. Very common practice with crackers is to put little holes in the dough, which prevents it from rising too much, getting a little puffy. That's called docking, and it's done with a very specialized tool called a fork. And all you need to do is take the fork and punch some holes in each cookie, and certainly in each cracker, and certainly if you've looked at crackers, you see little holes in them, and that's the reason the holes are there, even in commercial crackers, to prevent them from rising too much. So we rolled them out to 1/16 of an inch using our fancy guides. Put oil on them and salt on them. Cut them with a pizza wheel, and now we're ready to bake. Let's go to the oven. Well, the oven is set for 350 degrees, and we're cook them for 25 minutes. But at halfway through, we're going to do a little pirouette where we take out each tray, rotate it, switch the top tray for the bottom tray, and put it back in again. So we'll come back at halfway through and show you how we do that without having to hold a tray in each hand and get all confused. So one tray goes on top, and one tray goes on the bottom. And we'll set the timer for 12 minutes, and we will return. So we're coming up on the halfway point. When the vapor goes off, we're going to take the top tray and put it on the bottom, and the bottom tray and put it on the top, and rotate each of them by 180 degrees. To facilitate that, I do have a rack sitting next to the oven so that I have a place to put the tray down when I take it out of the oven before I rotate it. I'll also turn the light on inside the oven so you can see a little bit better what's going on. Turn the We're taking this one out straight out. We'll take the bottom one, rotate it 180 degrees and put it on top. We'll take the old top one, rotate it, and put it on the bottom. And now we'll let it bake for another 12 or 13 minutes, take them out, and see how they taste. We'll see you then. So it's been just about 26 minutes or so since we put them back in after rotating them, and now they're done. Let's see what they look like. I mean, take a look. Doesn't that look gorgeous? So we have here is a very simple sourdough cracker, which took about 2 hours to make altogether. And this is great to put onto, you can put a piece of cheese onto it, you can put some hummus onto it, with your favorite dip, build a canapé on it, or just eat them like they are. Once again, this is the recipe from the King Arthur Baking website. I'll put the link down for it. Very simple recipe. I'm Mark Levy, your sourdough simpleton, with yet another recipe for you to play with. Hope to see you back here next time. Please do subscribe to the YouTube feed, join the Facebook page, visit the website www.sourdoughsimpleton.com, Sourdough Simpleton on Facebook or on YouTube. We'll see you next time.